Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahey. Today's topics I'm going to be talking about are publishing tools for online writers, basically. So with my site for this podcast and everything, I was messing around back when this all started, sociallynumb.com. I was messing around with having it on Apple News. Now, I wasn't sure how strict they were going to be, because if you know, Google News is notoriously tough to get into. It's very hard. So I assumed Apple News was going to be the same. Multiple publications a week, and I've heard that it's been very difficult to get approved. You have to have quality content dating back. So basically, I went ahead and I started to fill this out in August, September. And so I filled out all of the information, had a graphic uploaded for Socially Numb. And when I went through it, I had to get publications approved. Now, at that point, all I had for each episode was just a small little 1-2-liner description. And I knew that wasn't going to get the job done. So I did some research on how long articles had to be for Google News. And so that was my baseline. So I wanted to have all of my articles and write-ups for Socially Numb to be a certain standard, have a certain length, have a certain description, and that type of detail on my site. And so I've been constantly working on that over the past couple weeks. I've mentioned it before on the show. And so I've been testing things out and trying to just improve the show to make it better. That's always my goal. Try to expand its reach. We've had good download numbers, as I mentioned before. And so I want to keep that growing, and I've been getting positive feedback and things like that. So I know that tech is very, very popular subject. And even whenever I do some of the trending topics and things, as I've been trying to loop them back in, like with the Nintendo Switch, very big topic, very big hit of a show. And so I try to do that as best I can. And only being one man, it's very tough for me to do that. And so what I have been doing is trying to get all of my content in one location. Okay, so I started to move all of my content into, I had a GitHub repository that was running Jekyll, which is a static blog platform. So basically I could put my posts in Jekyll and it would create static HTML files. GitHub is great, very easy to maintain repositories and things. But as I've been moving over more and more of my graduate school stuff, I have like some databases on sports that I've been building. I was running out of space. Basically, I didn't want to have multiple subdomains that have multiple just different projects in them. Some of them, yes, I understand that I could have a subdomain that would go ahead and hold information for me. And so I figured that would work out well. I could go ahead and have 2 or 3 different projects on different repositories, different URL locations, and GitHub would host it. I would just set up my DNS server to point at these different locations. Perfect. Everything would work out well for me. So I went ahead and I started to make the move. I needed to move my blog somewhere though. And this is where the site's been updating. I've talked about it. It's very boring stuff, but I'm going to dig into it a little bit today just to get into the details so that everyone knows where I am and why I'm doing it. And then that's it. This will be the last one, but I figure the publishing tools, my insights, might help others who are looking into the same thing. And so basically I just needed, what I wanted was a simple platform that goes ahead and lets you set up publications, and I could run my blog. Now, I knew with Apple News that I needed multiple posts a week. Socially Numb itself wasn't going to cut it. I had broken out Dad Strength, my second podcast on parenting, after I started to get a lot of hits on Dad Strength, and people wanted to know where the location was. I had some feedback like, hey, I'm interested in the podcast. It looks like when I go to your site, it's part of another podcast that isn't the same thing. So for some users, it was confusing. And yes, I understand that. And I know if people were trying to read like a little bit or maybe make comments, that's fine. They want it to be in one central location. So I went ahead and I broke that out. And as soon as I did, the traffic didn't really take off. Everything was still coming. I had a lot of 404 hits, even though I had redirects. It was showing me that people were looking for the dad strength stuff on Socially Numb. And I figured I'd let it go for a few months, and the traffic never really picked up. It's hard to have multiple domains. If you're just starting out, if you're an independent publisher and you're looking like, hey, I have my own website, try not to do too many ideas. I've tried multiple projects in the past, and what works is always having everything together, one central stronghold. And so that was what my idea was originally. I would put Socially Numb, have my blog posts all in one location, and there I would have one place for people to go. And I know maybe it was just my design. So my design had people confused, and so I wanted something that was a little bit different. And so with Socially Numb, I thought, well, maybe I should go ahead and look into this Apple News thing. They want, if I get on here, I'll have a lot of extra exposure. And so I went ahead and I started to make moves. Now, I was going to go ahead and use my regular domain. I've mentioned it before, RichieLeahey.com. And so I've been looking at different platforms. And so I started to migrate most of my content into another platform that would be easier. So I picked Blogger. It's hosted by Google, and it's free. I figured I can go ahead, throw all my publications here underneath RichieLeahey.com, my main portfolio domain, and kind of have a couple subdomains just for my database stuff still on GitHub. That was my idea. Well, I went ahead and I set that up. But it was kind of tough because I didn't want to have a blog at that location, I guess, long term. And so another platform I was checking out around the same time was Medium. So Medium is a basic bare bones blogging platform. You write, it gives you your own statistics right there on the site. Very cool, very clean. And now I do caution anyone who's listening to this and you're thinking, hey, I can set up my own site. What's the best platform? People are going to say that you should host it yourself. Make sure you own the content. So with Blogger and Medium, they both make sure that you own the content. You can export all your files and you can move it into your own. The other one that I considered was WordPress. I could have used the free WordPress with intentions of possibly moving to a paid platform that I could host myself. I could have also hosted Jekyll. But Jekyll didn't have, I guess maybe if I hosted it myself, I could have found some ways to work it out. But what was happening was I was spending a lot of time in development and not a lot of time in writing and getting my content up to snuff and all in one location and expanding the podcast. I felt like I was always behind the ball. So that was one of the things that I was looking at too. I wanted something that I could casually update. I already built my theme a while ago before this launched. I know there's been some issues. I've been stripping out a lot of the stuff to make it fast and light, and that takes time. So as I see issues and errors on the site, I try to fix them and upgrade, and that's what I've been working on. And I didn't want to go ahead and go through that development cycle all over again. Because as I was building the site for Jekyll, the theme, I was also parallel building it for WordPress, knowing that WordPress is a free platform. I could pay for hosting somewhere, depending on the traffic I get. That's where the costs can really skyrocket up. And so I was worried that, hey, maybe if too many people were visiting my site, I could get costs run out of town. The offset with that is if you have WordPress set up and you're getting that much traffic, you can probably monetize it with ads. That is how most people who run blogs offset the costs of paying off the servers and everything. So I did a little trial run on Jekyll because you can throw ads on there. I did see some returns based on days and articles that had big numbers. And so moving to Blogger, they let me keep that. And after a while, whenever you're doing a free platform, you're getting some money to offset the costs, which I was going ahead and using to pay off the hosting, because when the downloads picked up, my free Amazon S3 tier that I was using ran out. Like I was above the limit every month because of the amount of downloads I was getting. And so I know I could always pay that, I could also move those to another hosting platform. If you're looking into podcasting, I'm probably going to go ahead and do an episode totally on podcasting. Maybe that'll be the next one. I don't know. But just for people, so I figured I'd start this one on the publishing platform, and then maybe the podcasting, and then video or something, depending on what I'm doing. So continuing on with the publishing, I could host my podcast anywhere, and that will be a later thing. So what I'm looking at right now is just blogging. Again, I wanted something free that I wouldn't have to pay for because I already have to pay for podcast downloads. And so I just basically wanted to break even as I'm doing this, which I've been able to do. So I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like I've been lucky to do that and have that work out. So the idea behind it is to keep going. And as I grow, that's where I have to get worried a little bit. It's in the back of my mind that I need something in place that I can grow and sustain. A basically free platform, which encourages me to do it. I don't want to get some bills and be like, oh man, I have to cut this out of my personal funds to keep this going. So I've thought about doing like donations and stuff, but right now we're going to keep going because it's able to work out, just providing like free content. And maybe whenever the Amazon S3 comes up, I have a small cost, might be able to offset that with ads or whatever. So I figured Blogger would be the way to go. It would have Google behind it. And when I started to dig into it over the past couple of weeks, I just threw on a Blogger theme, thinking that I could go ahead and easily modify it. But that wasn't really the case. So Blogger, as a platform itself, hasn't really been updated. And Google has been saying that they're making changes and things, but it basically feels abandoned. Not very helpful, very outdated way of updating. Posts are great. You can't change permalink structure, URL structure, or anything like that. I mean, I guess you can a little bit. You have a little bit of control. But it was something that I thought maybe I could just get something a little bit simpler. And that's why I was running with Medium for a while. And they let you have a custom domain. I think you have to pay for an SSL certificate now because they had some cuts in January. So that was before when I was looking at this. They had like a free custom URL. So I didn't want to set up Richie Leahey at the time because that was my regular domain. And if it didn't work out, I didn't want to have to switch and lose it. So I wanted Medium to be, if it was a lose situation, whatever, it's not a big deal. So I set it up. I saw there was a tech article or a tech blog, I think called the Cooper Review maybe, which I went ahead and I think I talked about it on the last podcast. So I started to look for like an alternate naming. And so I went through some cycles and ultimately settled on the Leahey Report, which is kind of like the Gribble Report from King of the Hill I've mentioned before. And I know there's some other popular sites like the Drudge Report, I think has like some of the highest views. So there is some sustainability with the URL like that. So I dug into that. I figured, cool, it's not taken. I can go ahead and set it up and I can maybe dual post articles. So originally I figured I'd post articles in both places. But I know with SEO, the search engine optimization, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea at all. Because when it's in two locations, Google will assume that you're spamming, and then they won't list either of your sites. So Medium has a pretty cool thing where it automatically links to your original blog if you post it there. And so the more I was digging into it, my Medium numbers were much better. And I went ahead, and so the blog is cleaned out right now as I'm working on moving, because I want the articles to be categorized or listed in order the way that I wrote them, because I had some of my graduate school blogs and stuff, like tech articles, on this site. And so what I did, I thought, well, if I have this, basically my graduate school I was posting maybe once a month. So I had it on Blogger. I was posting maybe once a month. Then last September, whenever I started Dad Strength and Socially Numb, I figured, well, if I add these together and maybe do one more small post a week, that would give me 3 posts a week, which is what most people recommend to get into like a news platform. Now, obviously, if Google wants you on there, you'd have to have multiple authors and writers. And so I was looking into this, was whenever I was starting Southbound Sports. I had a few other people that were interested in writing and producing content on podcasts and videos. And so I knew, well, I don't want to throw everything onto the Leahey report. First off, that's pretty egotistical because then everyone's writing for me, and it seems like then it's my name on it. So if someone's writing inflammatory remarks or anything, then it's going to be a reflection of me whether I want it to be or not. And so I had looked at some other domains that I owned. Southbound Times was one, and it was basically kind of like another one. It was between that and the Leahey report at the time, but I ultimately went with my name, like I said, because I wanted my name out there. I figured if people saw that, they might see RichieLeahey.com, which is where I was still going to do my database work. And I kind of didn't work out the URL thing where I'm linking to articles or what I was going to do. So I wanted a connection for people who stumbled upon it. And I figured this way, if I went with a totally different URL structure, I could go ahead and pull Dad Strength in and pull Socially Numb in. That way visitors wouldn't be confused. They wouldn't land on another site that was dedicated directly to the podcast. They could click on the podcast tab. They could click on Socially Numb, which would probably fall under tech. So I can multi-post in different categories, different tags. So there's multiple ways for people to get the same information. So I started to move everything into Blogger. I figured Blogger would go ahead and have it. And I was multi-posting on Medium. And so whenever I got the custom URL set up, I was getting much better numbers on there. And so I did some questionnaires trying to figure out where people might want me to host in the future. And I had my own feedback too, because Medium, I already had everything in place. And I've mentioned this before, I was losing time on development stuff that I didn't want to have to redo. So I already had our theme set up for WordPress and set up for Jekyll. Very similar, I just had to throw different tags in for each platform because it's blog stuff. So here, I go ahead and I get that ready. And now I have Medium, which I don't have to do any of that stuff for. So it was a natural movement for me to put stuff in there just for a bit, just to test it out. But Blogger itself, the tags were outdated. It wasn't like Jekyll and WordPress where it was very easy to use my theme and cut it in and out. There was like one theme editor. You can't edit on the fly. I mean, I guess you can, but for me, it was like cutting out different widgets and save states that I had. And so I didn't want to waste more time just developing because I had a lot of content to move over. And so I decided, well, what if I just take my Blogger and put it in Medium? But my idea was that I wanted the dates to match the date that I originally wrote it at. And since I have, just to get in some more technical things on the back end of things, Google has webmaster tools where if you own a URL and you're tracking it with analytics, you can go ahead and put your authority on it. And then you can kind of like tell Google to crawl it. Whenever it's set up, you can kind of put redirects in place, check and see what people are searching for, which is what I said, how I could see that Dad Strength, people were looking for it on Socially Numb still, well after the fact. And so I figured I could just go ahead, throw the redirects in place. Hopefully everything works as advertised. I mean, there's going to be, anytime you transition from URLs to URLs like I've done in the past couple months, it's not good for your search engine stuff. It's not good for your domains. It's not good for your authority. But this is kind of just an experiment I'm doing. And so if people are starting out, what I would recommend, what I've learned, is to go ahead, get your URL set up, get your content in, let it sit. You can go ahead, link to it, share it every once in a while. You want to start sharing it so that it gets brought up in search engine results more and more. And so here I am. I'm doing it multiple times. I want to make sure that everything's working. I've tested different ideas. So basically my site has been a guinea pig. And again, I don't recommend anyone having their site be a guinea pig. So listen to what I'm saying and what I've tried out and try to settle on your own solution. So now what I could have done was move directly to WordPress. Again, I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be hurt either way because I have to go ahead and move my URL to a new structure and lose everything. So I'm hurting no matter what happens. But for content, I didn't want to pay, get hurt, and then see a huge drop off on content, on posts, on listens for the podcast and everything. So my idea was maybe I'll just stick with Medium. I talked to the other people who are contributing to Southbound Times Southbound Sports at the time because we ended up going with Leahey Report. And then for the sports one, they liked the idea of Southbound Times, but with that, I wanted it to be sports, and Southbound Sports was available. So it was a natural thing to just go ahead with that. And one of them redirects to wherever. I don't remember where I set the redirects up, but they redirect to my other properties. And so basically just giving you a little bit more visibility for people who were out there looking for our content. So I went ahead and set that up, and they wanted to go with Medium. I figured that's great because for a collaboration publication, it's perfect. People sign up. They don't have to worry about keeping long posts. They don't have to post on their own site. They can set up their own publication, or they can only write for the ones I set up. So I set them up, get our favicon, whatever it's called, everything set up, all the logos and everything for the publication. And I start to move content over. Now the dates, again, I wanted them to match. So I kind of have to go through and set it up when they were published with the author, have them import it on Medium, and then perfectly set it up and go. So it took me some time to get Southbound Sports up and running, but I also had a couple other people that were writing, and so we did that one first just as a test. And so now what I'm doing is with the Leahey Report, I had it and I thought, well, let's see. If it's going to be worth it, I need to be able to get something out of it. So I had this Apple News submission. I've been approved for Socially Numb. So I thought, well, I'm not publishing enough on Socially Numb, so I'm not getting approved. I need to get some articles approved. So I go ahead and I point to the Leahey Report. I say, hey, we changed our name to Leahey Report. It's still the same content. We still have a podcast on tech. Can we change our stuff? Yes, I'm able to change it. Very easy on Apple News. I just went through, submitted it. I read their their frequently asked questions or their user guide. It wasn't very clear, but I figured, well, whatever. Socially Numb's not going to get on anyway by itself. Right now, it's redirecting to the Leahey Report. So I went ahead and set all that up. I had the redirects in place, and I went to check it. So I went in, and I thought, all right, I'm going to take a couple articles that I've written so they can see my tech content, and I submitted them to Apple News. Got approved. And I did Southbound Sports at the same time and also got approved, which I figured Southbound Sports had a better chance because we had multiple writers. And that was one of the things that Google News looks for. They don't just want a one-person blog. You have to have an editor. You have to have a couple things. So Southbound Sports, we had to set up two editors, I think, and a writer or so, and that had content already in. Some other writers. So potentially we had some other ones. We didn't move their content in yet. Still talking through that stuff. But I figured that one would be our best case. So that one gets approved pretty quickly. So I'm like, all right, cool. If Southbound Sports gets approved, there's a chance that I can get the Leahey Report approved. And then this would go ahead. If the Leahey Report gets approved, I can move everything in and go with it. It will stay there, like I've said. But again, I didn't want to be paying for WordPress or anything ahead of time in case I didn't. And I like the free platform. I don't need the advertising. I want people just to read the content. If they like it, come back, favorite it, like our stuff, share it on social media. Perfect. That's what we want. I just want people to get out there. If there are things that they're interested in that you don't get coverage on, perfect. Let me know. I'll look into it from the tech side of things. I have expertise there. That's my area of expertise. I have some sports stuff. I've been working on some database stuff that I had from graduate school that I thought was interesting that I want to put out there. That's the idea behind Southbound Sports. Is it set up yet? Am I ready to link and start to make my articles on there? No. So I just wrote some opinion pieces, threw them up there, got us approved. Perfect. I even covered a live game of softball for the ACC Big Ten tournament. I covered a couple games, just threw up some pictures, something cool, and that's what I've been looking at. So here's the Leahey Report. So I throw in some dad strength content. I worked on expanding it, which I've talked about on this podcast before. It's just a time-taking process because I'm only the one writer on the Leahey Report. And so I throw everything up, and I wait. Didn't hear back. It took a little bit more time than Southbound Sports, but I was approved. And so I thought, well, I got approved, so this is good. So everything's going to be moving into it. And at the time, I think I was still moving content into RichieLeahey.com. I can't remember. I didn't want to bring it up on the podcast and have it fall through because you can't really be sure. So one of the things whenever you're looking at these publication platforms, again, you're not in charge of the platform. You don't own the platform. I think with Blogger, when I was doing research, I saw that they deleted someone's whole blog, entire blog and everything. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you download your backup file. You can then go ahead and use, pretty sure there's still a Blogger import tool in WordPress to import your posts and have your WordPress up and running if you need to pay for your own domain. So that's my backup no matter what. No matter what platform I use, my backup is to always just go back to paying for WordPress, which I've paid for before when I was in graduate school. I had to pay to have my server, to run my tests, to do programming on. It was cheaper just to run my own server than to pay for like virtualization with another platform, some cloud platform where they hosted my computer and I didn't have control over it. Yeah, again, someone else is hosting your website. So no matter what, you don't have a physical, unless you're physically hosting it in your house, you don't have that control. But that's basically how things are set up. So it's up to you to make sure you have backups. So if you get into this, back all your stuff up. Back it up on multiple. If you have it on a cloud drive, back it up with one of the major cloud people. Back it up twice. Have two if your stuff's small enough. I think Google Drive gives you 15 gigs of free space. Back it up there. I mean, it's already a website. So if the stuff's in your web, it's already public. So if you're going to host secret stuff, it's probably not a good idea to put it on the web. It's better to just maybe buy a hard drive, get it in a safe deposit box, possibly encrypt it in case something happens there. Keep one in your house, keep one at your parents' house or something. Just kind of break it up so that you have a backup file if you ever need it. That's if you have hardcore stuff. But you have to look at it from a way, how do I have information in here and what am I going to do? And so that's basically how I set everything up. When I'm on the web, I want it backed up. I know it's not in my control. So I have a backup and I have a physical backup. I actually have two physical backups at my house, one in a fireproof safe that I do maybe every month or two. I don't do that one all the time, but I do have another backup that I do pretty much weekly. And then whenever that's done, then I just go ahead, delete the folder structure and put it on my fireproof backup. So I constantly have backups and I have it on one of the cloud providers. So the physical backup for me, it's easier to get back up and running. If I go through Dropbox, Google Drive, what are the other ones? Box.com, OneDrive, any of those, Amazon Cloud Drive, I have to physically download my site again and then re-upload it. So it takes a little bit of time. It's easier to just go ahead and move it from a physical drive. So I have all that set up. I have the website up and running. Good backup if you need it. So whenever I'm going into these platforms, I know that I'm going to be backing up my content, ready to go, that if something happens, I'm going to have to re-import it piece at a time. And I'm not like a super trafficked. I don't even think it's on Alexa. Well, of course it's not on Alexa.com website ranking because I keep changing the URL and things, which is another reason, again, let your domain sit. Let it run for a few years. Go ahead and have everything up, backed up, safe, and let your domain get some authority. If you have URL stuff, make sure you put the redirects in place. So again, if I get a WordPress, I know from my backups what the current URL is. I can go ahead and make my new URLs match either in WordPress because it gives you that flexibility, or I can go ahead, come up with my own URL structure and put everything together and have it right there at my grasp that I can go ahead and make sure that all my content and everything redirects correctly. So that's my backup plan no matter what. Is to move it probably into WordPress. I've tried Drupal before. WordPress is just so easy. And again, I've been working when I made my Jekyll theme for the original Socially Numb site, if you check that out. That's the same theme. I already have it in WordPress. Some of the colors and stuff I have stripped out right now. I'd probably make it match kind of what the Medium publication looks like now. Of course, it is going to look a little different. But again, you can't control everything. So that's basically what I had set up. I went with Medium after I got approved on Apple News. And now I let Apple News sit for a week. So I went in, when I set it up, I just threw up a handful of articles. And what I did was I set up a weekly report that would get emailed to me. Now that report was important because that would tell me how many people were viewing my articles and what kind of reach I was getting. If you're not getting reach, it's not worth it to have up on your site. Like, let's just be real. And I think a lot of people were dropping off. So again, that was another thing too. If this is a platform, you can either post your blog RSS or you can manually put them up, which is what I was going to do. Pick and choose articles, maybe throw them all up. If we're only doing once a week or whatever, I can throw it in there, make updates. I want to make it look a little bit different. Bare bones again, maybe cut out some of the video embeds and things if I'm going to start throwing them into Medium because it lets me do that. I want to cut those out a little bit because I want it to be a little bit different. The other one would be Facebook Instant articles. So you go ahead, you have that set up. It's the same type of thing. It's in another control. Yeah, it kind of gives you a backup of the article. So if something happens, let's say my host, if Blogger would have went down, Blogger deletes my blog, my post still lives somewhere for current time, plus the podcast is separate, which means that I have to make sure that everything is up to date, and I have to have control and know where I posted my articles, where is all my content, how can I back it up, how can I make changes. So I kind of have a little notebook that I go through, I have it numbered. I recommend people doing that, or like a checklist. You can do Google Keep, which has your checklist, and you can just duplicate it. I think you can. It's kind of moved into Google Docs. I can't remember. I either did one or the other. But then I can just do my checklist each week or each day whenever I post a new article, whatever I need to do. And so for the foreseeable future, our site is going to be hosted on Medium with Southbound Sports. I also help someone else set theirs up too. So I think I'm editor of 3 publications now. It's very simple for me. Everything's in one location. They have a great cell phone app. So if you're interested, check it out. The other thing with Medium is they have a feature kind of like stories on Snapchat or like Instagram that you can go ahead and click on and make like stories, like a storybook that you can only read on a phone. So I might investigate that as I look into a little bit more of a platform. So now the structure, I cleaned it out because a lot of it, again, was duplicate content. Dates didn't match. So it's going to take some time to put the new content up. So yes, I'm very sorry. I apologize. Again, just to give some background, that it wasn't just that, hey, I've been saying I'm going to do it and then I don't do it. No, I've been looking into other publisher platforms. That's what I was doing. And I wanted people to get insight that, yes, it is possible. Being a one-man show, you can be on Apple News. You can have your blog up there. Did I need to publish multiple times a week consistently for maybe, I think it has been 6 months or so? Did I need to do that? Maybe not. I don't know. But I did my research and I tried to figure it out. So if you have another story, a success story, or you find this, I don't know what I'm going to call this episode, either publication tools or something, let me know. So the idea would be that my site publishes everything on Medium. That's the main site. Also looking into maybe like a store they recommend, because I don't have the ads run on Medium, which wasn't a big deal anyway. But maybe set up a store, which I thought was a cool idea, because I would like to wear a shirt around. Because to me, that's free advertising. And I would probably make one anyway. I've already looked into it. I almost made one at home with like iron-ons and stuff. But it would be a little bit better that maybe, hey, I can just do one of those direct print shops online. So possibly do that for the Leahey Report. Most likely do that for Southbound Sports too. But that's my idea. Throw that up. That's what Medium recommends. Talking to some people on there, what they do for their publications just to help expand. So it's not getting tied up with a ton of ads and a really sloppy looking site. And so that's my publication tools research. It's kind of just been my own experience. And so with that, again, Socially Numb and everything has its own logo, has its own name, has everything ready to go, but it's going to be tied into that site itself. So I have my site, the Leahey Report, that's going to host all the content. Now this is also going to host everything with Dad Strength. One central location. So I'm going to post the show notes once a week. Again, it's going to take some time for me to get everything moved in. I have different things in different locations. Yes, I've been looking at the search results. Yes, people are reading it. If you only listen to the podcast, because there's a good faction of people that just listen to the podcast, I get way more downloads than I do views. But just to share some numbers on Apple News. So I published 3 articles. I think I did all tech ones from my original blog from back in the day. I published them to get approved. And so just to show like, hey, I have quality work in here. I also have some podcast stuff, whatever. So I throw a little mix in. 3 articles, I let it run for a week. I get my weekly report. And I don't even think it was a full week, because I think I got approved on a Wednesday, which means, so if you're going to go through the process of Apple News, I'll give some background. So what you do is you get approved with your iTunes Connect, I think, which is the account that I had to get this podcast on iTunes. So if you don't have that, it might be a little trickier. I don't know, but at least they know that, hey, they can look at the iTunes thing, and since my publications are kind of connected, they can see that, hey, I've been consistently putting out a new podcast every week. It's on their platform. They know that I'm doing it. So it may have given me a little bit more clout than someone who doesn't have that. So just to give you background, yes, I did have my everything's in the same iTunes username, my publication, the podcast and everything. And it does go through iTunes Connect, I believe, which I already had set up, that has my 2 or 3 shows because I'm the owner of a couple of them. And so then I have my own shows and then I have my publications, which I only got 2 of them up there. Because again, I wanted something that I was publishing multiple times a week. So I had the 3 up. I think it was like a half a week. I had maybe 1,800 views, which is 1,800. I know it's hard to see if I'm not saying the number. If I just say a number, you might not get it. But 1,800 views in about half a week. I do think it was Wednesday I got approved. And so I got the report. I record this on Sunday still right now. I might change it to Saturday. I used to record on Sundays because of football, but with that not being on, it's kind of tougher. But going back, anyway, I got the report on Sunday morning before this podcast, and I knew that I was probably going to talk about the publication tool since I've been approved anyway, but the numbers helped to back that up so that I can give you, the listener, some background. So I had over 1,000 views. I thought, wow, this many people read my articles. I had a couple likes. I had a couple shares, which was very cool because it's another way people see the Leahey Report. Again, if you're going to do your own show, you want to kind of keep it consistent as a brand. Yeah, I have the Socially Numb as my show. That's not going to change. The Leahey Report is the written word, and then I have the Socially Numb as the podcast. I did have it as a YouTube channel, but again, I'm pulling that all under my own name, just for consistency's sake and everything. So that's what I'm looking at. And again, whenever I have everything set up, it just takes a little bit of time because I've been moving everything for the past couple months. So I do not recommend that. I don't recommend moving content from different URLs back and forth multiple times. It doesn't help you. All it does is hurt you. Just so that everyone's aware of that. Again, this is just kind of a test for me. I didn't know how popular that podcasts were or if they still are popular or anything. I know they hit big a few years ago. Now it's kind of replacing radio. I've heard a lot of people that don't buy satellite radio that used to. They just download podcasts. I know of some people that make enough through Patreon to fund their show and have a nice second paycheck. There's a few people, outliers, that are able to pay for their whole income on podcasting. But again, I don't have that much of a following. I don't write any books or anything to have that level. This is just something I like to do. Maybe I'll build it up in time. I haven't even been going for a year yet, so I have to make sure that I consistently do it for a long time. That's usually how podcasts are. Some of the most popular ones have been around for the longest time. And so with that, they go ahead, they have the long run time, they have clout, they get bigger names on. I haven't had any guests on. That's an area that I can improve on. But again, I wanted to make sure that I had the site in place first before I started to dig into interviews and getting people on for something that I can point to, because with that, you need to be able to point at your site and say, hey, this is what I have, these are the numbers I get, and that type of just statistics that you can show out to other people and get listeners on. Or vice versa, you might have to go on other people's show, like a 2-for-1 type of deal. And so that's what I was looking at. That is what I needed to do. And with me trying to get the site set up and stuff, I just wasn't in the position to start to pull in guests yet. I know for Southbound Sports, I've had the other writers appear as guests, and it does make the podcast a lot better. So it is something that I'm looking into right now as I'm going, but I'm still growing the show, and it's taking some time. But again, constantly I'm working on it just so that everyone knows, like, hey, I am working on the show. Here are my ideas. Yes, I'm expanding it. Yes, I'm looking at other publication tools. I'm looking at the Apple News. I'm also looking at Facebook Instant Articles. That one I haven't set up yet. Don't even know if I'm approved. I think I have to go through the same process, so I'll probably use the same articles I did on Apple News. If I get in, great. If I don't get in, kind of a bummer. But hey, you can't do everything. But if I'm hoping that I can get in, just get some extra exposure, and that's what I'm looking at. So right now, I'm probably say the Apple News publication tool will probably be what I'm going to call this podcast, just because I want people to know that, hey, I've done research, I've been approved, and this is why I've done it. This is what I've looked into it, and this is what I've been hoping to accomplish with it. So again, that's what I've been doing. I've been looking at the podcast as a platform. I've been looking at the site. Yes, I need to have show notes each week. Yes, I need to dig into it and have it up. Yes, I've been writing those. Yes, those live somewhere. But currently, do they live in one place? Not really, and that's why. So again, I have everything down in a couple multiple locations, and I've been working on it. Is it ready to go live yet? No. Have I been making strides? Yes. And so with that, as I'm growing, that's the idea behind the couple URL changes. Yes, it's going to live under the Leahey report now. That is what I had approved by Apple News. So since that was approved by Apple News, I didn't want to go ahead and resubmit it. I didn't want to call my publication just RichieLeahey.com. That didn't make sense to me, because it doesn't, like, if someone's going to be new and they're looking for like some tech coverage and they just see someone's name, they don't know who that person is. And if they look me up, I'm not published enough to get that type of clout. And yeah, I know I could try to get published or whatever. Maybe I'll do that with some of my stuff. But for right now, I just enjoy doing the podcast. I enjoy the work I do, and I like to talk about it. So it works out pretty well. So I went ahead and I wanted it. I ran it through a couple people, ran it through like a little focus group. Here's some names, here's some ideas. And then after we narrowed it down, we went to the Leahey report. I like it. Again, I gave the reasoning behind it. It's very cool to me that I can have something that's kind of tongue-in-cheek as a name. And so that got approved. With that name gets approved and everything else, boom. Socially Numb could have worked too. But again, I wanted to put the parenting stuff on there as well and try a couple different things for that content. I have a podcast going, and that's something that I've been doing. But as a parent, once you get out of that initial stage, it's very tough for me to cover certain things because every kid's different. And to be honest, I've been really lucky by having a great child. So I don't have a lot of things to like talk about or like give insights because of how great she has been. And so with that, I need to kind of have that. I wanted it together because, again, that at least gets me to 2 publications a week, at least. Then I throw some other things in. And just to give some ideas, some other content that I've been looking at is maybe doing an expanded look at, I always wanted to do music, but with music reviews, it's not going to really work. I didn't want to do straight reviews. Like, hey, here's a rating. Here's my rating. Like, okay, here, sound quality, length, whatever, lyrics. And then I try to do like some type of thing. I did that in the past, and it's always tough to break through to just doing reviews because the bigger sites that are reviewing things, they might already have something in place for years. So they have an attachment with record companies who may be able to throw them records. They can throw them albums. They can go ahead and throw them free games if you're doing game reviews. So I've looked at doing that. But again, I play one game a week for the podcast, and I didn't even talk about it this week so far. But I play one game a week. Maybe I could do that as an extra, where I kind of have a screenshot of that at the top, talk a little bit about the game, give it a little bit more hands-on for people that don't listen to the show. Because as of right now, my write-ups, it's tough for me to write a write-up on a game. So I might start to do that just to keep going. Again, my goal is to have 3 publications a week on Apple News. I don't know if they take it away. So that's my other thing. I don't know if they take your posts away or take your publication status away. I hope not, because I'm still moving things into it. So it's going to be a lot of growth at the initial outset. But for Apple News, I want them to know that, hey, I'm working with it. So that's what I'm doing. So again, hopefully this is interesting to you, just to give you some background. People might stumble upon this podcast if they're interested in the Apple News platform. They might not know so much background on our site, but I hope I gave enough of the process on that. It's hard to tell. And with that, thank you for listening. We're going to go ahead and shift and just talk a little bit about the game of the week, and then we'll end it with that. I think I went long enough today, so I can go ahead and talk a little bit about that, and then we'll call it a day. And then, again, if this goes well, I'll probably cover maybe my podcast platforms and getting those up and running, even though the Medium doesn't really give me a place to host. Like, okay, this is where we download podcasts. I've been linking them at the bottom of some of the Southbound Sports ones. I'm probably going to do that with the Leahey Report. I don't know if I can do that in Apple News. Maybe. It might be better for Apple News just to link to the iTunes store listing for the show. I'll have to test it out, because I believe if that happens, you can point directly to it, and then that way you can go ahead and show that that is the location. People can just download it. They can subscribe right to the show, and it perfectly works. But without further ado, here is the Game of the Week talk. All right, for today's Game of the Week segment, I'll be talking about Shovel Knight. Now, this is a game that was released years ago. I think 2014. I have it for the PlayStation Network. I can't remember if I got it as a free game or if I used points to get it from Christmas. A few years ago, I had some family buy me some digital games just to have, and I think that might have been how I got Shovel Knight and Towerfall Ascension on the PlayStation Network. But either way, the Nintendo Switch came out. I played Shovel Knight. I knew that they had expanded it since I got it, because like I said, I got it years ago. And I figured it warranted a revisit from me on the mobile platform that is the Nintendo Switch. And I will just say that this is perfection. This is what the Nintendo Switch was made to do. So anyone that's going to complain, talk about, graphic processing power or anything, you are missing the point. I am able to play an NES-style game. In the middle of the game, pause, put my console in sleep mode. A few hours later, I get out of work or whatever, I turn the console back on. I am right where I left off. I do not have to worry about finding a checkpoint, finding a save. I was worried how this was going to work, because in Zelda, the game constantly saves. So I would just quit the game, because I figured, I heard that if Zelda's running, it could kill the battery in 3 hours. So I was afraid to just turn the console off. And I've heard people talk trash on the console, saying that it's a piece of junk. I've seen someone on YouTube made like a compilation of like all the fails of the console and like how people have had trouble, but I haven't experienced any trouble besides the left Joy-Con disconnecting, which I believe is because of the power. If I sit near my television, I don't have any problems. It's if I'm sitting back across the room and sitting on the couch or something, like pretty far away, because we have two big TVs in our room. Like I have a dual TV setup. I think I talked about it before. So you have to kind of sit back pretty far to enjoy that. And so whenever I'm back there, it will disconnect a good bit. And I think if they would add the extra antenna inside the inside the Joy-Con, it would fix it. Like someone reported that you can take apart and add it yourself if you want to, which at that price, if they don't do a recall, and I'm assuming that they're going to go ahead. They might not announce it, but I'm assuming that if they can't fix it with a firmware update, I would think that the reason they don't have it in that one, that's the one that has, is it the camera button or the share button? Or the home button? I think it's the left one has the camera button. So maybe there's something with the camera button that uses more power. So they probably didn't put the antenna in, not as a cost-saving measure, but because they wanted both Joy-Cons to live the same battery length. At least that's what I think. So hopefully I'm not giving them more credit than what it's due. I would hope that that's what they had based it on. So if you add the extra antenna, it's another component that needs powered, and maybe that left Joy-Con dies faster. I don't know. That's my assumption. I haven't tested it out. But if that gets fixed, perfect. But like I said, I like to play on the go. There are times where you're traveling, you're in a commute, you're sitting down, you're waiting, you can pull it out and play. Perfect. It is amazing for that. And like I said, I put Shovel Knight, I picked that. I knew how the game works. So when you're in a world, you can't quit the world. There are checkpoints scattered throughout, and you can go through and beat it. And I think there were like 8 worlds. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll get this for the Switch, and we will really see how the Switch handles it. And like I said, it is perfection. Some of the levels are long. I'm having trouble with the boss. I don't have to sit there and play. In some of these retro games, like that's how it was. I played more, it's like Super Mario World, like the original, or Super Mario Brothers, the first one. You couldn't quit in that game. If you died, that was it. You couldn't pause and save and continue. I think they redid it with Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. I re-got the game, and I think you could pick your worlds, and then it would kind of save your progress as you were working through them. And, I mean, yeah, that makes the game a little bit easier because there are no continues. But now, if Nintendo can put the original NES ROM on the Switch, you could play how it was intended with no saves, no continues. You play through, and as you're playing, hey, if I'm running out of time, pause the game, put it in sleep mode. No problem at all. I was able to jump right back in where I was. Perfect. Picked up right where I left off, and I was able to beat the game. I think it timed me, and I went through and I tried to beat every little segment that I could just to see how long the game would take, and I think it took a little bit over 5 hours. And I played casually. I was like trying different things with that whale or whatever. If you've played it before, I mean, it's pretty old, so if you haven't played it, check it out. And if you played it, you know what I'm talking about. So the game has been reviewed countless times. It's a great game. So more specifically for this game of the week, I was looking at how does it handle on the Switch? Is it worth it to get it? Because the slim pickings on the Switch right now. Some of the games like RPGs and things, I mean, the game could be perfect for that. The Switch, you're playing a game that normally takes 30, 40 hours, like I think I talked about on here before. Like if they announced a Witcher for it or something, one of the games, that's a possible rebuy. Now, I understand there are countless development cycles, and the game would probably be re-released at $60, and I wouldn't pay full price again for it, even though I received it as a gift. That's just me. I mean, it's an old game. So that's where you run into the problems. But hey, it's probably going to drop. And until I beat Zelda, and I'm still 20 games behind on my PS3, I've been playing Assassin's Creed after I saw the movie, which I haven't talked about, but I'll talk about whenever I beat it. Assassin's Creed 2, I already beat Assassin's Creed 1. Well, I'll talk about the whole thing whenever I beat that game for my game of the week. But perfect. Shovel Knight on the Switch, I only played through the first quest. And of course now it's called Treasure Trove on the Nintendo Switch. They do have one that's separate. I think it's like $20, and if you buy it separate, like the new quest is on there for $9. Get Treasure Trove, because you get Treasure Trove, I believe you get updates constantly throughout as they release more worlds. So if you haven't played the original game, I think it's made by Yacht Club Games maybe. Great company, great game. They're a small developer. I don't know if they've made any other games, but definitely I like to try to support ones that listen to the customers and try to help out. So just like The Witcher 3, Shovel Knight is a game that basically has the season pass for free. And what the season pass is you play as a knight who uses a shovel as a weapon. He has his own special skills. You beat the game. That's the game that I originally beat years ago. So I recycled back through, played it on the Switch. Same experience. The controls are a little wonky. Like I said, I think they're going to come out with better Joy-Cons down the road. Maybe the technology is a little expensive in 2 or 3 years. I'm hoping that they have one with a D-pad. You can kind of pick your configuration. Maybe one that even is an NES controller or a Super Nintendo because of the buttons or whatever they need to do, that I can just play undocked. And I could set the Switch up on my desk, and then if I needed to, hopefully they have like a D-pad style Joy-Con that comes out later. But other than that, the buttons, which is beyond the game developer's control, the game itself is great. And then Yacht Club Games, what they did is they released 2 additional campaigns. The first was kind of like a retelling of the original story from one of the boss's point of view, so you play as him. Plague Knight, which is the one I'm going to be playing through next. And then the third game, which just came out and is the standalone on the Switch version, I think is Spectre Knight maybe? I'm not really sure. But basically 3 campaigns for the price of one. And if they release any more and you own Treasure Trove, I believe you get the other ones free downloads as they come out. So it's great. Perfect for that. I highly recommend it. It's a great game to have for mobile. Right now, there's no online. If you need a game, pick it up for the Switch because it's perfect. Like I said, You want a retro feel? That's what Nintendo was built on back in the day with the NES and the Super NES. Until they get their online stuff sorted out and figured out, which I'm probably going to be it's going to come out sometime near Christmas, I would imagine, as they're trying to make a push for people to buy Christmas consoles. So don't be afraid for people who haven't bought a Switch that, hey, they haven't made decisions or anything that would make me want it or anything like that. I'm thinking everything that people expect from a game console will be coming as they make a push towards the Christmas season, because they've had good sales now. They want to keep that up. So they're going to be probably pushing some bigger firmware updates. That's my hope. I don't want to be like in their corner or anything, but that's how I feel is what's going to happen if they want to be successful. If not, if they just think people will buy it, then they'll fail again, and hopefully other developers put some games on, because for me, perfect console. Hey, maybe down the road, like I said, this might be the last console I buy. I don't know if Nintendo, what their strategy will be, but if this becomes a failure and they try to replace it with another home console or like a 3DS upgrade, it's going to be a bummer for me. And the only thing I'll be able to do is just grab some multiplayer games, invest in them whenever they become real cheap, and just have my own basically dream console. I think that, after I've played with it in the field, I've played with it a lot more than any other console I own. I play with it every day because I can. I can go ahead and grab it if I need to sit somewhere, like I said, on my commute. Perfect. If I'm using public transportation, perfect. If I have time to wait because I'm traveling somewhere or someone's doing something, I need to give someone a ride. Let's say you're picking a friend up at the airport. Boom, I can sit there and knock out some levels of Zelda. I think someone said that it takes like 3 hours for you to ride the whole way around the map on Zelda. You can do that at chunks at a time in your car. Whenever you're like shopping for groceries, you're like walking around the store. If you really wanted to, you could play it any time. And that's what makes it perfect, because then you can come home and then finish off your quest. That's the best feature that I've seen. I go ahead, I want to lay on the couch, watch some basketball for the NCAA tournament. Boom, I can throw up Shovel Knight if I wanted to. I didn't really do that either, because like when I got home, I was playing through Assassin's Creed on my TV, but I could have. And there are times that I would. Now I want to just beat my PlayStation games so I can move, and hopefully, my goal is by the time I beat all my PlayStation games, there will be more that come out for the Switch. There's been rumors of an Assassin's Creed that's going to come out that's exclusive to the Switch. I don't care about the exclusive thing, but I hope it's true, because now that I'm getting back into the Assassin's Creeds, I got them a few years ago just to play through, because to me, there haven't been any really good games that draw my interest. And I know that's subjective. Yeah, you might think that there are great games or whatever, but some of the ones I like to play that you can just relax, follow a story. I don't need to play Call of Duty. To me, if I'm playing multiplayer, I play Doom with some friends, but other than that, multiplayer, I like to sit down and play with someone else. I got Snipper Clips. That's been great for it. I'll be bringing that in. We just haven't beat it, because I'm trying to beat that as a co-op game to bring into the podcast. I know I'm probably going a little bit long. I thought the publication thing was a pretty big deal, getting on Apple News, especially because I've seen some great returns. And just to let people know that, hey, I'm not just picking and choosing and moving the podcast. I'm not going to move the news every week. Basically, the goal was to kind of feel things out for the first year of the podcast, see if I even had listeners. My goal was to get 1,000 downloads in a year, and I smashed that goal. So I'm very happy with how things are going, and now I'm just trying to set it up for long-term return and success. So thanks for listening. Check out Shovel Knight if you don't have it. If you got the Switch, definitely get it on the Switch. It's better on the Switch than on a regular console, just to throw that out there. And that's it. If you're looking for publication stuff, let me know. I can give you some feedback, some more of the technical details. I don't like to go into too many technical details, just because it's a podcast, anyone can listen to it, and I don't want to talk over anyone's head. So send me a message. I think you can subscribe on Medium as we start to get these, to get them emailed to you. That's the next thing, and I might do a newsletter. We'll see what happens as I expand, because I always had that set up, but I don't think I linked to it anywhere. I don't know. But check me out, theleahey.com. All my content, slowly moving over there. If you have Apple News, favorite The Leahey Report. You can get the podcast directly from there. I deciding where I want to link on, whatever. But that's it for this week. I already went too long, so I'll quit babbling. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.